tonight's topic is salt. What do we really know? Yes, that's right, salt. SALT. The first time we explored this topic, which was the last time that we explored this topic, we went through a video called The Salt Lie, What's Really Behind Your High Blood Pressure, It's Not What You Think, by Emma Voicey, right? There's lots of people, including scientists, healthcare professionals, all the rest of it, that are pro-salt, and there's a lot that are against salt. So I don't know which one's misinformation, and that's why I've got this topic. We also looked at the Britannica breakdown of salt, which I found quite basic, I must say. But yeah, that was that. That's okay. What we're going to do is go to the next level. I've found, I did a research and I found loads of articles, scientific articles, where it goes a little bit more in depth. There's a couple of them that are for salt, and there's one that's for salt, and a couple that are against salt. And out of the two that are against salt, one of them is from 2016, and the other one is 2020. And I'm thinking maybe we should look at the one from 2020. And then we could look at the one that is for salt. I think I've got the dates on that right. Let me just check. Got one here. A systematic review of the sources of dietary salt around the world. May 2020. Then I've got a one from the Journal of Clinical Hypertension. The Science of Salt, a regularly updated systematic review of the implementation of salt reduction interventions, June to October 2015, but published 14th March 2016. And I also have something written in the Oxford Academic, Food Science and Technology section of it, and it's called Assault on Salt Intake, sorry. This is Food Science and Technology, Volume 37, Issue 1, March 2023. So I think I want to look at that one second. And the one I want to look at first, I want to go to not the one on sources. Well, actually, yes. Let's have a look at a systematic review of the sources of dietary salt around the world. On screen, how do I do that? That's how. Okay. I've got to get this off screen. Right, so that's as big as I can make it for you guys. Yes, and of course, in the description under the live stream, I will eventually get the source, any source that I look at during the live stream, put in there. This says, and now this is in the ScienceDirect.com website, and it looks a lot like PubMed and all the rest of them that are on that standard, if you like. A systematic review of the sources of dietary salt around the world. Sayuj Bhatt, Matty Marklund, Megan E. Henry, Lawrence J. Apple, Kevin D. Croft, Bruce Neal, Jason H. Y. Wu. What's this? School of Medicine, the University of Western Australia, Perth, Western Australia, the George Institute for Global Health, Newtown, New South Wales, Australia, the Friedman School of Nutrition and Policy, Tufts University, Boston, MA, which I don't know what MA is. Is that Massachusetts or something? USA, Department of Epidemiology. I don't know where Boston is. John Hopkins, Bloomberg School of Public Health, Baltimore, MD, USA, Welch Center for Prevention, Epidemiology and Clinical Research, Johns Hopkins University, Baltimore, MD, USA, and School of Public Health, Imperial College London, London, United Kingdom. So I wonder if that's to do with where those people are from, where they've been studying this. Anyway, the abstract says excess salt intake contributes to hypertension and increased cardiovascular disease risk. Efforts to implement effective salt reduction strategies require accurate data on the sources of salt consumption. We therefore performed a systematic review to identify the sources of dietary salt around the world. We systematically searched peer-reviewed and grey literature databases for studies that quantified discretionary salt added during cooking or at the table, and non-discretionary sources of salt, and those that provided information about the food groups contributing to dietary salt intake. Exploratory linear regression analysis was also conducted to assess whether the proportion of discretionary salt intake is related to the gross domestic product, GDP, per capita of a country. We identified 80 studies conducted in 34 countries between 1975 and 2018. The majority, I don't know what this means, I'm not quite getting these little math terms. N equals 44, or 55%. The majority collected data on dietary salt sources within the past 10 years and were deemed to have a low or moderate risk of bias. So that's 94%. 32, which is 40% of studies, were judged to be nationally representative. Populations in Brazil, China, Costa Rica, Guatemala, India, Japan, Mozambique, and Romania receive more than half of their daily salt intake from discretionary sources. A significant inverse correlation between discretionary salt intake and a country's per capita GDP was observed. P is less than 0.0001, such that for every $10,000 increase in per capita GDP, the amount of salt obtained from discretionary sources was lower by 8.7%. 95% CI is 5.1% or 12%. Bread products, cereals and grains, meat products, and dairy products were the major contributors to dietary salt intake in most populations. There is marked variation in discretionary salt use around the world that is highly correlated with the level of economic development. Our findings have important implications for the type of salt reduction strategy likely to be effective in a country. Introduction. Hypertension-related cardiovascular disease is a leading cause of mortality and morbidity worldwide. A diet high in salt is one of the leading risk factors for high blood pressure. A Cochrane review of salt reduction studies with a duration of more than 4 weeks found that a reduction of 4.4 grams in daily salt intake led to a decrease in blood pressure of 5.4/2.8 millimeters Hg, which I don't know what that means, in hypertensive individuals. and 2.4 slash 1.0 mmHg in normotensive individuals. A more recent Cochrane review observed a reduction in blood pressure of 5.02. Right, I need to find out what these mean because I just don't know what I'm saying. So let's have a look. Blood pressure, I don't know what that means, these symbols, so I'm going to find them. There's a few terms there. There's normal intensive. Normal intensive, sorry, I need to find out what that means as well. Right. Let's blood pressure calculator because this might describe what those terms actually mean. Right. A blood pressure test is a simple way of checking if your blood pressure is too high or too low. Blood pressure is the term used to describe the strength with which your blood pushes on the sides of your arteries as it's pumped around your body. Okay, so this is hypertension, pre-high stage 1 and high stage 2. There's normal and there's low. Right. High blood pressure, which is hypertension, can put a strain on your arteries and organs, which can increase your risk of developing serious problems such as heart attacks and strokes. Low blood pressure, which is hypotension, isn't usually as serious, although it can cause dizziness and fainting in some people. A blood pressure test is the only way to find out if your blood pressure is too high or too low, because most people won't have any obvious symptoms. Having a test is easy and can save your life. Okay, where does it show me anything about what those symbols mean? Right, understanding your blood pressure reading. Blood pressure is measured in millimeters of mercury. So that's what the mm is, millimeters, and mercury is Hg. Okay, and it's given us two further figures. Systolic pressure, the pressure when your heart pushes blood out. Diastolic pressure, the pressure when your heart rests between beats. For example, if your blood pressure is 140 over 90 or 140 slash 90 millimeters of mercury, it means you have a systolic pressure of 140 millimeters of mercury and a diastolic pressure of 90 millimeters of mercury. Okay, so going back to, all right, hang on. As a general guide, we'll read this bit. Normal blood pressure is considered to be between 90 over 60 and 120 over 80. High blood pressure is considered to be 140 over 90 or higher. Of course, that's higher than the high end of normal. And low blood pressure is considered to be 90 over 60 or lower, of course, lower than the low end of normal blood pressure. A blood pressure reading between 120 over 80. Hi, Mark Dunk in the chat. Good to see you. And 140 40 over 90 could mean you're at risk of developing high blood pressure if you don't take steps to keep your blood pressure under control. Right. So, not want to go too far into the ins and outs of blood pressure because we need to go back to that paper, but I just needed to find out what those symbols meant. So, it's millimeters of mercury, mmHg. So let us go back to here we were, and I'm going to start this again then. Oh no, hang on a minute. I want to know what this normotensive means as well. Find that. Normotensive, having normal blood pressure, not hypertensive or hypotensive. So hyper is high, hypo is low. Let me have a look. Norm refers to having, describes individuals. So yes, search assist. The AI says being hypertensive is high blood pressure, hypotensive is low blood pressure. So normotensive is normal blood pressure. All right, so I've got that sorted. And now come out of there, from there, and come back to this time. I don't know if I can teach you anything like Magdang. I've got to try and learn it myself as well. Okay, so back to this science paper. Introduction. Hypertension-related cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of mortality and morbidity worldwide. They've got a source further down in the document for anyone to look at. A diet high in salt is one of the leading risk factors for high blood pressure. A Cochrane review of salt reduction studies with a duration of more than 4 weeks found that a reduction of 4.4 grams in daily salt intake led to a decrease in blood pressure of 5.4 over 2.8 milligrams of mercury in hypertensive individuals and 2.4 over 1.0 milligrams of mercury in normotensive individuals. Hi, I'm Magdunk. You've found me in Kick as well. Welcome. Remember to follow or whatever that thing is that you're doing there. A more recent Cochrane review observed a reduction in blood pressure of 5.02 over 2.78 millimeters of mercury in hypertensive individuals and 1.08 over 0.24 milligrams of mercury in normotensive individuals. Despite the observed relation between salt intake and blood pressure, the health effects of salt intake continue to be debated. While most studies report a direct progressive association between 24 hours urinary salt excretion. I don't know what that means, honestly. It's a bit too sciencey for me, this, isn't it? Let's have a look at what that might mean. To be sure, I understand what it means moving forward. Yeah, it does. It means 24-hour. Okay. So going back to that, we'll start. Whilst most studies report a direct progressive association between 24-hour urinary salt excretion and all-cause mortality, others suggest a U or J-shaped relation between morning fasting urinary salt and cardiovascular events. Although inaccurate estimation of salt intake is a potential contributor to the J-shaped findings reported in such cohort studies. Based on modelling data, approximately 3 million deaths and 70 million disability adjusted life years lost every year have been estimated have been estimated to be due to excess salt consumption. Considering the strengths and limitations of available data, many scientists have concluded that excess salt consumption is harmful to health, and major health organizations and most governments around the world are actively implementing strategies to reduce population salt consumption. The recent modelling estimates from the Global Burden of Disease data suggest a daily average salt intake in adults of 14 grams, nearly 3 times the World Health Organization's recommended intake of 5 grams. Other studies have estimated lower intakes of 9 to 10 grams a day, which still substantially exceed World Health Organization recommendations. Despite efforts to tackle the high dietary intake of salt across the world, progress on this front remains slow. A variety of salt reduction interventions exist, ranging from structural approaches such as taxation and reformulation to individual focused measures such as health education. Understanding the main sources of dietary salt in a country can help guide the choice of salt reduction strategies that are most effective, equitable, rapid, and cost saving. In particular, the proportion of dietary salt that is obtained from home cooking versus foods made outside the home is an important consideration, as interventions targeted to the more common pattern of salt consumption are likely to be most effective. For instance, reformulation strategies are likely to be more effective in countries where a large proportion of dietary salt comes from packaged foods and food prepared outside the home, whereas salt substitution may be more effective in countries where there is extensive use of discretionary salt. Discretionary salt is salt added to food. Where was it? Oh, right. Discretionary salt is salt added during cooking or at the table. So, uh, at present, there are no reviews quantifying the sources of dietary salt worldwide. Our aim was therefore to conduct a systematic review of the literature to identify the sources of dietary salt in all countries with available data. Our study was conducted under the premise that salt reduction is not only possible but also beneficial. We hypothesized that the majority of dietary salt in high income nations would be obtained from packaged foods and meals eaten outside the home, and in low and middle income countries from salt added during cooking or at the table. Methods. Search strategy. A systematic search of peer reviewed and grey literature published up to 8th of February 2019 was conducted. The systematic review followed the PRISMA, that is PRISMA, guidelines. A protocol for the study has not previously been published. The following databases since their inception were used: Medline, Embase, Scopus, Trophy, Lilacs, Central, Cinal Plus, Global Health, Allied and Complementary Medicine Database, and the World Health Organization International Clinical Trials Registry Platform. Detailed search terms used are provided in the supplemental methods. You click on that, see what comes. And included diet, sodium or salt and source or intake or ingest or consume or survey, and food or cook or product or add or table or discretionary. Only studies published in English and Spanish were included, and no studies published in other languages were identified. Reference lists of eligible studies were scanned to identify additional relevant publications. In parallel, a search using these terms was conducted in Open Grey, World Health Organization, World Action on Salt and Health, and Institute of Medicine databases to identify pertinent grey literature.
Smooth moderator,